Hello, YouTube, and welcome back to another book review from me, your host, Logan Albright. Today, we're returning to an author I haven't done a review for in quite a while, but who I've done quite a few reviews of on the channel. It's the science fiction writer, Robert A. Heinlein, who is someone that I'm a fan of. I sort of have mixed feelings about him. I'm a little frustrated by him sometimes, but I really do like Heinlein. He is one of this sort of original generation of like 50s, 60s sci-fi writers, very prolific, and I think he's one of the more thoughtful ones. He is a very philosophical bent, and he's able to write great stories, but they usually have kind of a philosophical underpinning to them. And he's big into challenging taboos and exploring different ways of looking at the world, not just technology, not just science, but different ways of understanding human society. And I find him really interesting. And when he's good, I think he's really, really good. And when he's bad, I think he's bad. And he has a tendency to get rather self-indulgent, which we'll talk about a little bit later in this book. But I'm a big fan of his. I really love Starship Troopers. I really love The Moon is a Harsh Mistress. I really love Time Enough for Love. I like the first half of Stranger in a Strange Land, and then I don't care for the second half so much. But a very thoughtful and interesting and very different writer who is someone whose work I've enjoyed over the years. And I had this book lying around. It was found it in a used bookstore. It's kind of hard to find anything apart from Stranger in a Strange Land, Starship Troopers, and The Moon is a Harsh Mistress in bookstores these days, unless you go to used bookstores and get old copies of things, because those are his hits. But he wrote lots and lots of books, and this is his second to final novel, written in 1983, called The Cat Who Walks Through Walls. And I sort of had mixed feelings about this book. I think it starts off really, really strong. It starts off with a protagonist named Dr. Richard Ames, who's having dinner in a restaurant with his lady friend named Gwen, and someone approaches him and is trying to tell him something, trying to say that he has to assassinate someone or else it's going to be big trouble. And then that man in turn gets killed by a mysterious dart, and no one knows what's going on. And it kind of has this pulp fiction feeling, a pulp adventure novel kind of feeling, where it's like running around, people trying to kill you, you don't know what's going on, you're trying to solve the mystery, and it takes place on the space station, and then they travel to the moon, and there's all kinds of technology involved, and it's really fun. And Heinlein is very flirty in his writing, so the relationship between Richard Ames and Gwen is a big focus on this book, and their dialogue is relentlessly, aggressively flirty the entire time, and I think it's fun to read. He does have a weakness where a lot of his characters sound the same and kind of talk, in a similar style to each other, but it's very clever dialogue. It's very quippy, and it's not realistic dialogue, but I think it's fun to read. And Gwen is this, kind of firecracker, sarcastic, very independent and fun woman to be around. And Richard Ames is having a good time bouncing off her with their kind of barbs that they throw at each other and their little flirtatious remarks. And that's sort of the first half of the book, is mainly that. And then the book kind of loses me halfway through, because Heinlein starts to do the stuff that he does in all of his later novels, which is stuff that I'm not that happy with. One of the things is that this is sort of an expanded universe book in a way that he started to play with later in his career. It contains characters and locations and ideas from other books. So there's characters from The Moon is a Harsh Mistress, and there's characters from Time Enough for Love, and there's characters from Stranger in a Strange Land, and they all kind of show up as like walk-on supporting roles. That can be fun, but I don't know. It felt like it didn't need to be there. It felt like it was just sort of gratuitous in him doing that. The other thing is that Heinlein, if you've read anything by him, he's very interested in kind of sexual liberation and freedom in that sense. And that can be kind of creepy in some of these books. And the second half of this book kind of devolves into this idea of this kind of polyamorous, free love, multi-generational family headed by Lazarus Long, who was the main character in Time Enough for Love, who they encounter, and kind of get involved with that. And it just feels tangential to the main plot. Like, I want to get back to the mystery of what's going on, and they spend all this time talking about this stuff, and it's not interesting to me, and I find it a little creepy, to be honest. He also has a fascination with very young girls, very young women, and talks about them as if they're kind of sexually mature in a way that I think is, not great. Don't love that. But he was a man of his time and his generation, and he was very lecherous in the way he thought about these things, and so that's not great. But it all feels a little bit like a distraction, and like Heinlein kind of going down his rabbit hole of the stuff that he's personally interested in that doesn't really have that much to do with the story. I think it's interesting, though. I was thinking about this as I was reading it, like how taboo some of these ideas were when he was first starting to write, and how like this whole polyamory thing that he's obsessed with was probably pretty shocking in the 60s and the 50s and things when he was writing about it. And it's sort of come around now where like I know a lot of people who are in polyamorous relationships, and it's like young people seem to be doing that sort of thing all the time now. So maybe Heinlein was just ahead of his time and he's starting to come into his own now. But I'm not interested in that stuff. I wanted this space adventure, and I wanted the kind of detective story that we started at the beginning. It goes into a lot of sort of confusing detail about, to me it was sort of confusing about like multiple parallel universes and time running differently in different places, and there's all these people who have different ages who have lived hundreds of years, but they haven't really lived hundreds of years because they've been living in different timelines. There were time flows differently, so there's a lot of time travel stuff. They don't really travel through time, but like the speed of time and the way that time flows is different in different universes, and they talk about that a lot. But I didn't really find that it had a satisfying conclusion, and I felt like a lot of the premises that were set up in the first couple chapters never really got paid off to my satisfaction, and instead Heinlein devolved into his usual kind of self-indulgent speculations about, free love and things like that. And I don't love that. So this is my problem with a lot of his later novels that I've read, is that they always end up going in that direction. And I feel like he has the seed of a great story in here, but he just gets distracted with his personal preoccupations, and it ends up not being as good of a story as it was. There's one more that he wrote after this, which is apparently a similar type of story about the multiverse with all the same characters in it. I'm not that interested in reading it. I think if I go back and read more Heinlein, I'll probably read some of his earlier work before he kind of got famous enough to not really need an editor to just do whatever he wants. Because there's all these geniuses who we know about in fiction and movies and literature and all these different arts who get famous enough that where they can write their own ticket and do what they want, and that's often not a good thing. I'm thinking of someone like George Lucas, who's like, you need someone to tell you no sometimes. You may be a genius and you may have great ideas and you may have the capability of writing great stories, but if you're left completely untethered from criticism and from notes from someone, you tend to drift off into navel gazing, and you need someone to rein you in a little bit. And I feel like that's really the problem with late Heinlein novels, is that they end up just, very self-indulgent. So I was a little disappointed with The Cat Who Walks Through Walls. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it unless you're a diehard Heinlein fan and you want to read everything he wrote. He has much better books. Especially, like I said before, I really love Starship Troopers. I really love The Moon is a Harsh Mistress, and I really love Time Enough for Love. Those are all three great books that I would recommend to anyone interested in starting their Heinlein journey. But if you are starting that journey, just be aware that it gets pretty weird and pretty, sometimes kind of cringy in his later work, and so you may not appreciate it as much. But I am glad that I read The Cat Who Walks Through Walls, because I want to learn more about this guy as an author, and a lot of his philosophy that he espouses in his book speaks to me as a libertarian. He has a very anti-government position, with the exception of Starship Troopers, which seems pretty pro-government as far as I can tell. So I don't like that one as well. I mean, I like the story in that one, but I don't like the philosophy in that one as well. But things like A Moon is a Harsh Mistress is like a classic anarchist novel where he posits a moon society with no government, which is a wonderful read if you're someone like me who finds that sort of society appealing. So, but, I appreciate Heinlein for being an iconoclast and for being someone who is willing to challenge established dogmas and orthodoxy in a lot of senses, even if I don't always agree with him, and even if I find some of his darker avenues that he goes down fairly unpleasant. But that's really all I have to say about The Cat Who Walks Through Walls. Heinlein's a great writer. He's not always used to his full potential, and especially in his later works. If you enjoyed this review, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and click that bell for notifications. And make sure you check back every Wednesday, because I do my best to review a new book every single Wednesday about what I've been reading, and it spans all different genres. I happen to be talking about science fiction today, but next week, who knows what it will be? You'll have to check in and find out. I've been your host, Logan Albright. Thanks so much for watching, and I will catch you next time.